From Northeast State Studios in Blountville, Tennessee, this is Views of the SEC. And welcome to Views of the SEC. Trey Adams alongside Adam Benefiel, where we are talking all SEC football. Upset Saturday Part 3. I'm enjoying college football right now.
It's getting pretty close to 2007 in terms of craziness.
I completely agree. And 2007 was one of my favorite seasons of all time. I mean,
you had South Florida at number 2 for a while. Like, that was fun.
And remember Boston College? They were 2 as well.
Yeah, that was the Matt Ryan year where was it 2 straight weeks he came back with just insane comebacks like in the last 5 minutes in the fourth quarter.
And then they lost. Let's take a look here from last week's wild weekend. It wasn't so wild in the SEC as much as other conferences, but there were still some interesting moments. Of course, to talk about the last week's game of the week, LSU rolls over Arkansas 38-10 with great performances from Darius Geis and Leonard Fournette. Georgia shocks Auburn 13-7 and eliminates the Tigers from SEC title contention on the heels of a great second-half defensive performance. And then Ole Miss, of course, coming back and scoring 23 in the fourth quarter to stun Texas A&M with freshman quarterback Shea Patterson. And we won't get into that right now, but we're going to jump right into the LSU-Arkansas game. What did you see that impressed you from LSU on Saturday?
I just think it goes to show that kind of like we touched on last week, if they're not facing a top-tier rush defense, then I mean they definitely have the offense to win games. It's not the most explosive offense, but when you have 2 running backs as good as Geis and Fournette, then if the defense can't shut them down, then there's really not much of a hope to win against them.
Mm-hmm. We were actually texting back and forth, not specifically about Auburn, or not specifically about LSU, but about Auburn. And this is kind of similar with LSU. They are kind of a one-dimensional team.
Right.
And now they are getting ready to face one of the better rush defenses in the country with Florida. So one of the biggest problems that they have, at least had early in the season, was that they weren't able to move the ball, period, rushing or passing. And now that they've had Ed Orgeron, they have a little bit more leniency to move the ball around. I think that their offense has improved. Just give me your opinion on this. Do you think it was a good idea to fire Les Miles? Has it shown that it's been a good idea?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think for LSU it was a good idea to fire Les Miles, only because they've been trying to fire him for years.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And a lot of people in the LSU community think that allowing him to stay after the end of last year was a mistake. And you even heard the athletic director say that after, like, whenever they fired him, that they wanted to fire him then and now because they didn't want to give him a chance to run off 5 straight wins and then be stuck with him more. I think they were kind of done with the Les Miles wild ride. So they kind of took advantage when they saw the opportunity. But the fact of the matter is, you still have Les Miles players. You're not going to change the offensive philosophy in the middle of the season. Mm-hmm. So I still think it's a good team, and I think that Les Miles had a good team and brought in good players. But now I think that the team is kind of playing a little more loosely because there's not that weight on their shoulders of what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. And then, of course, how about Georgia beating Auburn? Real quick, let's talk about this. The Bulldogs, great defensive performance. This is one of those things where if you're a one-dimensional offense, you struggle.
Especially if you're missing one of your best running backs.
Yeah, Cameron Petaway, we didn't find this out till later in the week, but he was actually injured and out of the game, and that really prevented the offense from moving the ball. So let's go ahead and move on to the SEC standings. We look at this. Florida leads the East by 1 game, and this is a must-win game for Florida to clinch the East. Tennessee is right behind them, and pretty much Alabama has officially clinched the West and is ready to meet their match in Atlanta in December, which I don't know who is going to win the East, but it's not going to be pretty in the SEC championship.
No, it's just going to be, if Alabama were to drop a game against Auburn, the SEC championship game is just going to be the game to get them back into the playoff. I mean,
Yeah, I completely agree.
unless things go absolutely crazy, there's no way they're going to lose the championship game.
Are they on upset alert Saturday against Chattanooga?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I could totally see that.
I wouldn't know what to do if they lost to them. That'd be very shocking.
For me personally, because of my personal feelings about Alabama, and this is kind of petty, but that would be one of the best days of my life. Like, if A&M were to ever win a championship, it may be close to them.
It would top it, but not much.
Yeah, it'd be like 1A and 1B just because Alabama lost to Chattanooga.
That is a good point. Speaking of Alabama, let's talk about the SEC Player of the Week. Jalen Hurts, the freshman quarterback from Alabama, he's been playing sensational this season. Hurts had maybe one of his best performances of the season Saturday, going 28 for 37 through the air with 347 yards and 4 touchdowns, as well as leading the team with 100 yards on the ground. His 447 total yard ranks third all-time in school history, and he is the first Alabama quarterback to throw for 300 yards and rush for 100 yards in a single game in the entire history of Alabama football, which is unbelievable to think about. So let's move on to the SEC Game of the Week. Of course, it is going to be Florida at LSU. 1 o'clock SEC Network. Kind of surprised that this game's not on CBS, but they had to go to Knoxville for a 5th time.
Right. You just can't say no to Knoxville. I mean, who really wants to go to Louisiana and have all that great food and atmosphere? Like, we're just gonna hang out up here where it's cold and in the mountains and stuff.
The Smoky Mountains. It's been smoky in this area the last couple of days.
Yeah, it's been dry. There's been some fires, but it's been more cold than anything. What y'all can't see is that I'm wearing a hoodie because I am not used to it being this cold at this time of the year.
Right now I'm wearing a jacket from the 80s, so I feel pretty proud. So let's talk about this game for a little bit here. This is a must-win game for the Florida Gators to clinch the East and make it to the second straight trip to Atlanta. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think that maybe Tennessee, even if they lose, they could still get in if Tennessee, loses to Vanderbilt? Or if they lose this game, is Tennessee automatically in?
Well, I think if Florida loses this game, then I would say I would bet heavily that Tennessee is going to make it to Atlanta. Tennessee, since they lost to South Carolina, personally, I think they've been playing probably their best football of the year.
Minus the defense.
Yeah, but offensively at least.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Ever since they got rid of Jalen Hurd, well, ever since he left,
since he got rid of y'all, pretty much.
Yeah.
But just considering all the injuries that y'all had on defense, I don't think that y'all's defense is going to be able to be as effective as it was earlier in the year.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest problem for y'all early was the offense. But getting back to LSU and Florida, this is a big game for Florida, not so much for LSU. LSU doesn't really have a whole lot to play for except for which bowl they're going to go to. But yeah, I think LSU right now, not the Alabama game notwithstanding, I just think they're kind of in a rhythm right now that it's going to be hard for a Florida team that doesn't have much of an offense to kind of hang with them.
Mm-hmm. Of course, this game, if you remember, this is rescheduled from October 8th. Very controversial stuff happening. Of course, the hurricane missed Gainesville, and it was actually a really nice day that very Saturday, but
it was 70 and sunny.
Yeah, I wish for that right now. So do you think that there's going to be a lot of tension between both teams because they've been waiting to play this game for so long?
I don't think so, really, because they've had big games in between then. Mm-hmm. It's not one of those things where, to go to a different conference, like last year where TCU and Baylor in the Big 12 were looked at as possible playoff teams and the two best teams in the Big 12. And so everything was kind of geared towards that game at the end of the season. And the rest of the conference really wasn't that great. Oklahoma came on strong late, but it wasn't good enough to where that was their main focus for the year. I think after the postponement of the game and after the rescheduling, they had other fish to fry. They had other teams to worry about. So I don't think that their focus was quite as much on each other. Obviously, now that you get into game week, there may be some Florida didn't want to play us, so LSU might be a little mad or so on, whatever. But Honestly, I think it's a big game just because they're two pretty good teams. LSU, I think, is better, but holdover from the postponement of the game, I don't think that's really big of an issue.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this. This is the matchup to watch. Florida is facing one of the best rushing offenses in the SEC. LSU is averaging almost 233 yards on the ground. They have one of the best running backs in college football with Leonard Fournette and a pretty darn good backup in Darius Geis. But Florida counters with one of the best rush defenses in the SEC with only allowing 111 yards a game. What will give in this game? Do you think that LSU will be able to dominate on the ground, or do you think that they will not be able to move the ball because Florida will play a very good defense? And keep in mind, Florida has a couple of injuries on defense. They've got a couple of their guys out.
Sure. I think it'll be one of those games where it's tight early, and then it'll start to loosen up as the game goes on. Mm-hmm. I just think, over the course of the game, I think that the repeated pounding of the LSU offense will eventually loosen up Florida's defense.
Mm-hmm. So give me your prediction on this game.
I think it's going to be relatively low scoring. Give me 21-13 LSU.
I'm going to say LSU wins this game 31-13. I think Florida will be having to face a red-hot Tiger team looking to finish strong, and I don't think Florida is going to be ready for the LSU rushing attack. So let's move on to the other game of interest, Missouri at Tennessee, 3:30 CBS. This is a pretty important game for the Volunteers. If they win and Florida loses, they may have a chance to go to the SEC championship. They have to win out. Mm-hmm. If Florida wins, of course, it doesn't really matter. Tennessee, this is, of course, a must-win out. They have to have Florida lose in order to make it the SEC championship. They've had struggles on defense with they have a subpar rush defense. Missouri won last week against Vanderbilt with a strong defensive performance by Charles Davis and the entire Missouri defensive line. Give me your prediction on this game.
I really don't think it's going to be that close. Missouri can play defense pretty well from time to time, but I just don't think that they're very good, that they're that good of a team. Give me Tennessee 38-20.
I think this is going to be a relatively high-scoring game. We saw last week Tennessee gave up almost 400 yards on the ground. Tennessee has had problems with bad offenses letting them stay in games, but I'm going to take Tennessee 41-27 in the hopes that Florida loses. But, it's really a toss-up right now on what's going to happen. This is going to be a really big Saturday for the SEC East. So moving on to the final part of the show, we have predictions. This is the no-fun Saturday. Every SEC team is not really having a tough game besides Tennessee, Florida, and LSU, and Missouri. So let's start with Georgia versus Louisiana Lafayette. Who you got?
I'll take Georgia. I still don't think that their offense, as currently constructed, is that great. I mean, like we talked about last week, their offensive line isn't that good. Mm-hmm. But I'll take Georgia 38-10.
I think Georgia's going to have a really great game. After the victory last week against Auburn, very, very big-time victory, I got the Bulldogs 41-14. Texas A&M versus Texas San Antonio.
I'm still mad. That was so dumb. Okay, I'm just real quick. Why, whenever you're playing really well on offense, throwing the ball down the field in the first half, in the second half you're just like, nah, we're done. We're good, we're fine. Anyway, A&M, I'll take them 50-10.
I got A&M 62-14. South Carolina versus Western Carolina. Who you got?
South Carolina.
Got South Carolina 37-14. Kentucky versus Austin Peay.
Oh, poor Kentucky. I'm still backing y'all, but y'all let me down.
To Austin Peay?
No. I'm saying Kentucky let me down against Tennessee.
Okay.
And Georgia.
Everybody let us down last week.
No. Well, except for the top 2, 3, and 4. But yeah, everything else was kind of bad.
Got Kentucky 28-7. Arkansas versus Mississippi State.
Arkansas.
Got the Razorbacks 27-21 in overtime. Should be a pretty fun game. Alabama versus Chattanooga.
Chattanooga.
I got Alabama 52-10. Auburn versus Alabama A&M.
Oh, give me A&M. No, not really. Give me Auburn.
Got Auburn 49-14. And finally, Ole Miss versus Vanderbilt.
Ole Miss.
I think Ole Miss is going to roll now with Shea Patterson at quarterback. And that does it for Views of the SEC. For Adam Benefiel, I'm Trey, and I'm signing off. Goodbye, everybody.
This program is a presentation of the Communications Department of Northeast State Community College and is produced as part of the Student Learning Experience. The content of this program is produced through student participation and does not necessarily reflect the opinions and views held by the school.
The music today was provided by Jason Shaw at audioaudix.com.